Joseph's dreams from the pit to the palace. God's providence in hardship. The narrative of Joseph is not merely one of a man who went from poverty to wealth. Rather, it is a divine tapestry that is stitched with threads of treachery, injustice, patience, and endearing redemption. The truth that lies at the center of it is a profound one. Although the providence of God may not always be apparent in the present moment, it is always present and working through every turn of the path. Jacob had struggled for 14 years to marry Rachel, the woman he loved the most, and Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob and the firstborn of Rachel. Joseph was treasured from the very beginning, possibly in a too open manner. Jacob distinguished himself from his brothers via his favoritism, which was exemplified by the lavishly embellished robe that he presented to Joseph. Joseph's dreams, on the other hand, were the source of an even more profound rift. He had dreams in which he saw imagery that plainly placed him above his family. He saw his brothers' sheaves of grain bowing down to his, and even the sun, moon, and stars bowing down to him. Not only were these dreams not the product of Joseph's imagination, but he also communicated them with a childlike confidence. These were revelations from God, glimpses of what was to come, and they were prophetic in nature. However, his brothers found these to be unbearable behaviors. Already resentful against him, the dreams were interpreted as a sign of arrogance, and their envy turned into something more akin to hatred. They recognized their opportunity when Jacob dispatched Joseph to check on his siblings in the vicinity of Shechem. However, the garment of many colors that was flapping in the distance did not conjure up feelings of fondness, but rather anger as Joseph neared. A plot was hatched to eliminate him. The eldest, Reuben, was successful in persuading them to instead toss him into a pit, with the intention of rescuing him at a later time. On the other hand, while Reuben was away, the other individuals sold Joseph to a caravan of Ishmaelites that was passing by. Joseph, a young man of teenage years, was taken away from his family and sold as a slave. He was dragged away in shackles. The robe, which was now drenched with goat's blood, was returned to Jacob, who cried as if his son had actually passed away. Joseph, who was now in Egypt, went to the residence of Potiphar, who was one of the officials working for Pharaoh. Joseph's faith did not weaken in spite of the difficulties he was living through. According to the Bible, the Lord was with Joseph and he prospered. He served with excellence, and the Bible says that he was successful. Due to the fact that Potiphar recognized that the hand of God was upon his servant, he appointed him to the position of head of his entire household. However, just as things appeared to be getting better, another test came around. Joseph was the object of Potiphar's wife's passion, and she made numerous attempts to woo him. Joseph, whose integrity and devotion to God were the foundations of his decision, declined her approaches. Disgraced and humiliated, she made a false accusation against him, claiming that he had attempted to assault her. Joseph was imprisoned by Potiphar, who did not conduct any investigations or administer justice. It would have been simple to fall into the trap of thinking that the dreams were illusions. The decline of Joseph appeared to be irreparable, as he went from being a favored son to a forgotten prisoner. Nevertheless, even while he was incarcerated, God's providence was with him. The warden of the prison gave Joseph the responsibility of exercising leadership over the other inmates. This is yet another affirmation that may be found in the Bible. The Lord was with him and gave him success in whatever he did. Two of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were also imprisoned during his time in prison. Other officials included the chief baker. Each of them had a haunting dream, and Joseph promised to interpret them, claiming that God was the sole source of inspiration. Those of the cupbearer prophesied restoration, whereas those of the baker foretold execution. In the end, both views were correct. Joseph requested that the cupbearer keep him in mind and bring him to the attention of Pharaoh. However, the cupbearer failed to remember. A period of silence lasted for 2 whole years. Joseph continued to be held hostage. What we know about those years is that he waited, but not much else about them. When one is waiting, their faith is typically polished, and it is during this time that their character is forged. In spite of the fact that nothing appeared to be taking place, Joseph was making preparations. There was no absence in God's stillness. Rather, it was preparation. Subsequently, Pharaoh experienced nightmares, two of which were peculiar and unsettling. There was not a single Egyptian magician or wise man who was able to decipher them. It wasn't until that moment that the cupbearer recalled Joseph. There was a call for Joseph. He was brought before the most powerful man in Egypt after an extended period of time spent in obscurity and suffering. Joseph did not hesitate to offer praise to God. He informed Pharaoh, "I cannot do it," but he assured him that God would provide him with the answer he desired. In the dreams, it was predicted that there would be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of gloom. Not only did Joseph interpret them, but he also provided a prudent and strategic plan for efficiently managing the years of abundance and getting ready for the years of scarcity that were to follow. Joseph was exalted to the highest position in the kingdom by Pharaoh, who recognized the Spirit of God in him. Pharaoh was the only person in the land next to him. Joseph was given a new name, a wife, and control over the entire country of Egypt by him. Joseph went from being a prisoner to a prince in almost a single day. In reality, the dreams had not been fantasies. Rather, they had been postponed rather than rejected. Over the course of the prosperous years, Joseph carried out the plan with flawless execution. Egypt had food available even as the hunger swept throughout the region. Not only did Joseph's wisdom have the ability to save an entire nation, but it also saved the entire surrounding region, including the very family that had deceived him. Returning to Canaan, Jacob dispatched his sons to Egypt in order to purchase grain. Joseph, who was now dressed in a robe of power, met them as they stood before him, speaking Egyptian through an interpreter. Although they did not recognize him, Joseph was familiar with them. This was not an act of vengeance. Rather, it was a test. Joseph was in search of information on whether or not his brothers' hearts had shifted. He put their honesty, their commitment, and they were finally put to the test by their willingness to make sacrifices for one another. Joseph witnessed the shift that took place when Judah offered himself as a substitute for Benjamin, appealing with him not to cause his father any further suffering. Because he was overcome with emotion, he was no longer able to conceal who he was. He cried out loud and responded, "My name is Joseph. Are my parents still alive and well?" Fear gripped his brothers at the moment. On the other hand, Joseph spoke words that could only be produced by grace. "Do not be scared. Your intention was to cause me harm, but God had a purpose for it, to accomplish what is currently being done, which is to save the lives of a great number of people." This one statement is the most important part of the whole story. However, rather than working in spite of the difficulty, God's providence had been working through it. Everything that happened, including the pit, the betrayal, the slavery, and the jail, was all a part of a divine plan that was much more extensive than Joseph could have expected. It was not simply that God was saving Joseph. He was also protecting the covenant family, which would one day be the vehicle through which the Messiah would arrive. Because of the narrative of Joseph, we are reminded that hardship is not necessarily an indication of abandonment. There are times when the soil is the place where destiny is initially placed. There may be a delay in the dreams, but they do not pass away. These delays are not denials on God's part. When someone submits themselves to God, every moment of adversity becomes a thread in the fabric of his redemptive design. Joseph's life is a testament to a God who is sovereign and does not squander anything, from the pit to the castle it represents. Everything that happened, the unfairness, the waiting, and the tears, served a cause. In addition, when the moment was right, God raised Joseph up, not only for the sake of Joseph himself, but also for the sake of a nation, a family, and a promise for the future. Therefore, when the night is long, when the pit is deep, and when the palace seems inaccessible, the journey that Joseph takes reveals to us that God is still creating the story. Have faith in his order. The presence of his providence is unfailing. There are times when the most difficult circumstances give birth to the most important dreams. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.